we wish you welcome to this program of music from 18th century England. London, especially in the 18th century, had become a little bit different place from most cities in Europe. In the 17th and 18th century, primarily music was sponsored by either the king or the prince that ruled the cities. And through this person's sponsorship, the taste and the interest in the music was very much directed for the whole community. In London, since in the middle of the 17th century, there had been the Commonwealth period where there was no royalty sponsoring music. The musicians had to find other ways to make a living, and they partly found employment as teachers and musicians for aristocracy who was now not in the center of things going on, and also the upper middle class that started to have more financial situation that they could afford to take music lessons and so on. The musicians started to teach to these circles and publish music that would also serve for enjoyment in the homes. This situation continued after the Restoration and made for a very interesting setup for musicians in Europe, which is you could set yourself up as a free entrepreneur yourself and try your own luck at making a living out of music. And one of the biggest examples is, of course, George Friedrich Handel, who decided to move up from Italy, settle in London, and although at times sponsored by the royalty, he was running his own opera company and his own tries on things. It's quite a roller coaster ride financially. And with him, a number of other musicians came there. And as a result, somehow I saw a BBC program saying that the 18th century is a century without music in England. It's actually the opposite. It's a century where the best of what Europe had came to England, and they were all there. And so this program is showing that side. Another thing, though, that comes up is we're going now to the Vivaldi Lute Concerto. Vivaldi never was in England. And on the other hand, a lot of aristocracy from England, young men, when they were educated, would do the grand tour of Europe. They would go to places like Italy. They would collect manuscripts of music they enjoyed and bring back and have it performed. And actually in London, it's one of the places where they were very much enjoying Vivaldi's music, so it was a presence even without the composer being there. When we're doing the Vivaldi concerto now, though, when you usually hear it, it's done with a somewhat sizable orchestra, and very often you hear a guitar playing the lute part. And if you look at Vivaldi's actual score, he asks for 2 violins, 1 lute, and a bass instrument. And in the orchestra versions, they have a violin, 1 section, violin, 2 section, viola section, cello section, double bass, cellos. They've beefed it up to this big thing. We have actually done the opposite, made a chamber work out of it, because when you look at the parts, you have a violin part. The other violin part actually doubles with the lute, and just the violin comes and goes. So the lute's often alone, or they're playing it together. Then you have the bass part. So it's just 3 parts. So with 3 instruments, we're going to play all the notes in Vivaldi's original score. You'll hear the scale down, the kind of most transparent version you'll hear of this piece.
In our travels, we found out, for example, that the painter, Thomas Gainsborough, who was in London at the time that we were talking about, was an avid musician, an amateur musician, and he played all sorts of different instruments. He played the flutes, he played different kinds of guitars and things, he played all kinds of instruments, and he was actually a pretty good player of viola da gamba. Now, for those of you who haven't seen a viola da gamba before, I will say 3 words about that. You've seen a cello, you've seen a violin, they have 4 strings. This one, if you count them, you see it has 6. And another thing it has that's different from those instruments is it has frets, like a guitar. It's kind of more like a bowed guitar. It's called viola da gamba because you hold it with your legs, da gamba in Italian. And it's a whole different family from the violin, viola, cello. It's not an ancestor, it's just kind of like, you know, it coexisted. And a lot of people wrote a lot of really nice music for it. Well, Thomas Gainsborough's viola da gamba teacher was our next composer, Carl Friedrich Abel, who was a German that moved to London and actually set up a concert series there with one of Bach's sons, the very first chamber music concert series, just like this one. So I'll play for you 2 pieces by Abel. One is an adagio, a slow movement, such as the kind of thing that Abel liked to really enjoyed improvising. Just he would sit down in front of a bunch of people and just make it all up. Fortunately for us, he wrote down 1 or 2 of them, and this is one of them. And the other piece is a faster movement, sort of really showing off the instrument and all the different kinds of things that it can do. In fact, these 2 pieces are contained in a manuscript that was with the estate of Thomas Gainsborough, so there's another time.
when the lutenist Rudolf Straube decided to move from Leipzig to London around 1760, he came there thinking he would teach lute lessons. It's something he did to a small extent, but he found that much more fashionable, the instrument that the English called the guitar had come in place of the lute. Now, this is an English guitar, and as you see, it does not look like what we think of as a guitar at all. It's an instrument from the cittern family, which goes back to the term kitara of Greek instruments, similar to the guitar goes to it. And the cittern family, as the Spanish guitar family, have equal claim actually to this kind of a name as an instrument. These instruments had been quite popular. They were strung with steel and brass strings, and they're tuned in an open chord. In this case, it's a C major chord. These instruments became quite the vogue in the 1750s, and for the next quarter century, a lot of the major composers, including people like Johann Christian Bach, wrote very high level chamber music and solo pieces for it. By the 1770s, though, harpsichord builders like Kirkman in London found that people were buying these instruments instead of quality harpsichords. And he decided to try to solve the matter himself. He purchased a number of cheaper English guitars, gave it to panhandlers and balladeers in the streets, and had them play on it. And it became pretty clear that this was not appropriate for a lady of quality to play such an instrument. So, the background, or what happens with this, is actually quite interesting, because what had been an instrument with quite sophisticated music now becomes also an instrument much more of a folk music character. And it's a little bit reflected in the music we're playing here now, because some of it, like Rudolf Straube's Fantasy and Giardini's little sonata, it shows the sort of very high end of it. And in the set before that, we'll do many more popular tunes and more of the kind of entertainment music that was enjoyed by the middle class at the time.
I'll say just a brief word, we're running a little late, about Johann Fischer. Fischer was an oboist by training who played in the court of Frederick the Great, but moved on to London where there was free enterprise, and he thought he could make a living, which he did as the oboist in Queen Charlotte's band and also as a composer. We spoke earlier about Thomas Gainsborough, the painter, and it is interesting to note that Johann Christian Fischer eloped with Gainsborough's daughter, much against Gainsborough's wishes. Nevertheless, Gainsborough painted after the elopement a fabulous painting of Fischer, just absolutely spectacular, which is in the collection of the Queen of England right now. The marriage didn't work out, but the painting is terrific. Here's Johann Fischer's sonata. Thank you.